that there's a threat. And a threat isn't just somebody, guy with a baseball bat, emotional threats, whether that's our job, our spouse, our finances, just, larger political problems. I mean, people feel this kind of sense of being threatened emotionally. And so they use their anger to either attack the thing that stresses them out or to push away
How
the
does
things
the
that stress
stress
them.
of work, whether it's deadlines or the pressure to perform, providing for a family, how does that feed into that hidden or silent anger over time?
Well, I think there's a feeling of powerlessness or inadequacy or helplessness or worry about being judged. What are people going to think about me? And therein lies people don't want to feel vulnerable and talk about, like, well, I'm getting judged at work, or I feel lesser than my coworker who got promoted over me, or like, a family member who maybe makes more money than me. I'm dissatisfied with so many other things, and then the thing at work is happening.
The hidden anger builds up, and sometimes that anger, the person can start to hate themselves or dislike features about themselves.
We punish ourselves. And that self-hatred is really a way of punishing myself. I'm judging myself so harshly. It comes in this way of punishment. And that's where it is. I'm going to withdraw and shut down, or I drink, or like I, push people away because I don't feel deserving. There's a judgment over like what I should be versus who I am. Behind judgment is feeling guilty. And what happens with a lot of people in art, it's a constant process. But like, even if I make a mistake, I'm still a lovable person. Even if I struggle, I'm still lovable. Even if I intentionally do something that I regret, that I'm more than that moment.
All right, so we have a very special episode today. I'm so excited. My name's Tyquon Jordan, co-host and co-founder of Dash Wellness and the podcast. And I have my co-host with me, Karlin Humphrey.
Hey, glad to be here. Really excited about this topic.
All right, so we have a special guest, but before we start, I want you to really think about something. Why are men so angry, but no one sees it? I'm not talking about the explosive anger or the yelling or throwing things. I'm talking about the quiet anger, the frustration underneath the surface, the short fuse that comes out of nowhere, the irritability that, has nothing to do with the moment, the feeling that you're carrying the world alone. And a lot of men tend to, they don't hold their emotions in because someone told them not to. They hold their emotions in because they feel like expressing them won't do anything or help. And because, they're afraid if they fall apart, everything they're responsible will fall apart with, everyone around them, the kids, the partnerships, their families. And, you know, the more men hold inside, the more that pressure turns into anger. And anger affects their sleep, their relationships, their stress levels, and even their health.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we brought on today's guest, someone who has spent years helping men understand and manage their emotional world. Aaron Karmin is a licensed clinical professional counselor, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and the author of the best-selling books Instant Anger Management and the Anger Management Workbook for Men. He's worked with everyone from Fortune 500 companies to couples, teens, and men under extreme stress, helping them communicate more effectively, release anger in healthier ways, and feel understood.
Now, Aaron, we're so excited that you're here. Before we dive in, we always love to start about your story and what led you, to work with men in anger, emotional pressure, and healthy communication.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this. I think it's really one of those kind of topics that a lot of people are aware of, but they don't like create space to really learn about and examine a little bit deeper. So that's kind of what I hope to like provide the audience today. For me, like my background started with, I went to Roosevelt University here in Chicago, where I'm based, and I chose Roosevelt because they have a stress management institute. So learn these, in addition to my master's in clinical psychology, I have what's called an advanced certification in stress management. Just a long way of saying I'm certified to teach yoga, meditation, imagery, muscle relaxation, breathing exercises, different kind of self-care tools. And that really led to me what stress management, anger management, because what I found was working with all across the, I worked with people who were at a 10 of stress and people who were at a 2 of stress and everything in between. And I found a lot of men didn't necessarily have the tools to work on those emotional components. The physical components is one thing. I think, we learn math, science, cause and effect thinking. We don't always learn how to deal with our emotional side and how to process that, the mental stress, that like whether it's the pressure of work or home or family, marriage, kids, all those things that start to add up over time. It's like slowly wearing away. So I've worked in hospitals, I've worked with 4,500 employers, like you mentioned. I've worked with couples and individuals. I worked with, you name the presenting issue, the background of the person, all different kind of ethnic backgrounds, racial background, gender, every across the spectrum. And the through line is people don't know how to deal with anger. And I find a lot of therapists actually struggle to deal with anger. And so I found that like stress management really was a good opportunity to offer some concrete tools. I mean, talk therapy is important, but I often find like, what do we do? Where do we begin? How do we get started is really important because there's, you're talking about it versus how do we put it into practice? And so my experience of working with stress management, whether it was working in hospitals or it was working at a residential facility, working community mental health, and what I found was the same kind of techniques worked with all different kinds of people. So I really wanted to put that out there as far as writing a book and then writing a second book, doing podcasts, anything I can do in my own private practice to really kind of spread that message of like, there are interventions, there are steps we can take. We don't have to be powerless and stuck with this emotion because like 10 fingers and toes, we all have anger. We all have these parts of us, but what do we want to do with it? And that's where I think people get stuck. And so I hope to really explore a little bit more of that today.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And one of the key words that you said is tools. And I wish I had the tools early on when I was a kid. I'm sure a lot of people wish they had that knowledge on how to really deal with their emotions in a positive and effective way. So yeah, so why don't we just go ahead and get into it? So let's start with this. Research shows men are far more likely to express stress through anger or irritability, and far less likely to express fear or sadness, not because they don't feel those emotions, but because anger is often the only outlet that feels socially acceptable.
And, I want to caveat what I'm saying. These are a spectrum, right? Like not all women, all men, all kinds of people, but, everyone's going to have their own reactions. So these are going to come off as big, broad brushstrokes. But what I find is a lot of men have trouble expressing vulnerability. And anger is something that's more protective. Sadness and worry are much more vulnerable feelings. And what I try to speak to is this very normal human condition called the fight or flight reaction. And that there's a threat. And a threat isn't just somebody guy with a baseball bat, emotional threats, whether that's our job, our spouse, our finances, just larger political problems. I mean, people feel this kind of sense of being threatened emotionally. And so they use their anger to either attack the thing that stresses them out or to push away the things that stress them out, that fight or flight. And when I work with clients, what I try to speak to is that, we use that anger to attack the things that worry us because it makes sense, right? If there's a threat that's causing us fear or anxiety, well, I want to attack it. I want to push it, I want to kind of stop it from exacerbating and amplifying. And then sometimes we use our anger to push the F away and leave me the freak alone so we can withdraw and be sad and isolate. And there's that kind of fight or flight reaction. And so, really, anger is this kind of protective emotion from this underlying sense of vulnerability that comes from being sad or worried. And again, socialization is a huge part of this. Culturally, I think in America, a lot of men aren't socialized to talk about the sadness and the worry that are, again, pretty normal, just like two eyes and, 10 fingers and toe. These are all things that we have. But we don't feel the men police other men. It's like, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, be tough, be strong, push through it, rather than like, we have a wound. And part of being, I don't know, living on this earth is we all have emotional wounds, whether it's a breakup, it's family, part of the human condition is loss and loss of a job, loss of an opportunity, loss of money. And these are kind of the emotional threats, I guess I'm speaking to initially. And those emotional threats, we don't know how to process them because we haven't been taught the tools. And so really, if we're able to give people some tools to manage the anger, we can kind of peel the onion, get a little bit deeper. And what is really the threat? And that's the things that are causing us the anxiety and the sadness.
Yeah. And, you talk about anger as a cover up for other things, with the flight or flight and different stuff. Um, for the men listening who feel that quiet, constant pressure, the irritability, the frustration, how can they start to identify what their anger really is about?
Well, I think sometimes, I mean, first I try to speak to the body because, if the body, if you're hungry, you're tired, the body's going to win, right? Like either you can blink or you're going to control, you can choose to blink or your body's going to blink automatically. You're going to breathe or your body's going to breathe automatically, like a kid holding their breath. So if we're not able to address the body, then the body's going to take over. And I think that's where things get physical and very explicit and externalized, where people see the loud, or they hear the loud voice, they see the clenched fist, they see the face. And I think that's one kind of anger. But there's this passive aggressive anger. There's this withdrawing anger. I think you talked about this kind of like holding it inside and just trying to push it through anger. And these things that build and build over time. And so ideally, we have community. We have friends, family, siblings, parents, a spouse, people we can talk to because it's like a volcano. It's going to come out sooner or later. It's all going to erupt. And so we choose how and when to let these things out. Other techniques, I mean, communication is kind of the obvious one, but other techniques like, well, what does my body need? And sometimes it's just very self-evident, but that sigh. And I might not say a thing, but I come over your house to watch a game and I'm like, oh, you're not like, Aaron's full of joy, man. He's really happy. Like, tense, annoyed, bothered. Like, that's not a sign of a guy who's chill. That's a sign of like, man, there's something weighing on Aaron. And so, like, that's a little cue that physically you're creating tension in your body. And I could go through like breathing exercises and how that really speaks to like we're creating more tension by using that style of breathing. Most of us don't think about our breathing until we get congested. And so, a tool I offer is like taking some deep breaths. It sounds kind of cliche, but it really, to my point earlier, is that if we don't deal with the body, everything else starts to suffer. And so, the first thing I try to speak to is just taking a breath in your nose and blowing out like you're blowing at a match. It's a slow, deep breath. It uses your diaphragm, gets your heart rate down, starts to get your more oxygen in your blood, so your muscles stay loose, and then your thoughts are a little bit clear. And then it's a little bit easier to talk and let some of these things out. But I think sometimes it just starts with like expressing what do I need? Because usually behind these exaggerated hyperbolic reactions is a legitimate need. And I think so much of sweeping generalization, but a lot of men, we want to provide and care give, and we don't always think about our own needs. And we'll be small, we'll be convenient, we'll make do, rather than like what I need is equally important. And so I think, it's a long answer to a short question of like, how do I, address this? It's like, well, what is it I need? What is it my body's telling me? And those kind of questions, that self-reflection helps to then communicate maybe some cooperation, some collaboration with others.
Yeah. And um, that you said something about, uh, listening to your body and then expressing it, to support groups or friends or things. I'm just curious, when you work with people, is it more difficult for people who are introvert or extrovert to kind of express themselves?
I think we have different ways of expressing. I think a lot of introverts are thinking everything, but they're just not always comfortable expressing the things. And maybe that comes out like I can express it one on one, but just not in a group. And so there's like an extrovert, but sometimes an extrovert's a little bit more performative. They're not really being authentic and vulnerable and willing to let their guard down and be like, hey, I'm really hurt. And I think, the idea of like physical pain is something we all can identify. And if we start talking about it, like we all have hurt, right? And like these old wounds, maybe like I'm disappointed with something that happened at work today, but that reminds me of disappointment in my marriage or disappointment with my parents or disappointment with my money or disappointment with, and then like that anger is really building. And what we don't really hear with introverts or extroverts is just that authentic like feeling of hurt and pain. And that's where I think we can go as like a common thread with all people. It's like, what is that pain? What does that hurt speak to? And so I think introverts maybe are sitting with their pain and isolating, and extroverts might just be masking that pain and just trying to push through it.
Yeah. And, that brought up a great point. I mean, we talked about how anger, from a physical reaction, or whether it's you can yell at somebody, or whether you're throwing your hands up. I mean, you can see those, and it's maybe easier to identify. And people can say, "Hey, you need to chill," or you need to work on that. It's a lot easier, right? Because you could see it. But it's that silent anger, whether you're an introvert or extrovert, whether however you want to mask it, but that's really tough to identify and really tough to treat, I feel like, because not everyone sees it. And maybe you don't even see it in yourself. And so yeah, I just think that's something that we don't talk about enough. And so yeah, that was just a really great point that you brought up.
Yeah, I think again that opportunity to really, uh, it's not bad or good. It's like, how do I understand my pain? How do I understand others' pains? And that's the thing with anger. It's a lot of times it's people just want to be seen and heard. I think like food, shelter, we have a basic need called I need to be seen and heard. And I think a lot of you can't help but hear me when I get loud. But then there's that quiet anger. And it's like Aaron's like, yeah, that's really smart. Like these kind of tone, the little sarcasm, little digs that people make. And like, Aaron's being a jerk, man. Like, what's his problem? And it's like people take that personal and then they get angry rather than, well, what does it say with Aaron, man? Like there's something like he needs. And that's really hard not to take others' anger personally. And so I think like that's where like a little bit of like what's coming, how do we step back and like kind of separate the act from the actor, the person from the situation? Because if it's a stranger, it's like at the end of the day, like I don't really care. Like you're just some random person of the 9 billion people on this earth. But if you're my buddy, you're my family, I care about you, and so I want to be curious about what's going on that he's just. Yeah, that's really good. Like all these nonverbal ways of communicating the frustration. And so like that's where like, hey man, like and again, a lot of men have trouble expressing care. And that level, like, we'll use our behavior rather than our words. And that's kind of maybe a more explicit way of putting it is like we need to use our words to communicate what our concerns are and that we care. Because that makes us feel comforted. And to some extent, that feeling threatened, we feel safe when I know somebody cares and I can communicate what's really causing me the pain.
Yeah. And Aaron, here's something that blew my mind. A national stress survey showed about 1 in 3 adults experience extreme stress weekly, and over 60% of men say they rarely or never talk about it. And when stress has nowhere where to go, it becomes anger.
And so, Aaron, how does the stress of work, whether it's deadlines or the pressure to perform, providing for a family, how does that feed into that hidden or silent anger over time?
Well, I think there's a feeling of powerlessness or inadequacy or helplessness or worry about being judged. What are people going to think about me? And, therein lies people don't want to feel vulnerable and talk about like, well, I'm getting judged at work, or I feel lesser than my coworker who got promoted over me, or like, a family member who maybe makes more money than me, and I feel lesser. And this kind of comparison that comes out. And we're not really talking about it because sometimes we're not even aware ourselves of what's going on. We just focus on what's in front of us rather than kind of zooming out and noticing that there's these motifs, these reoccurring patterns. And so I think like if we're able to sit and be curious with ourselves, like what this might, again, I can treat the cough, or what's the underlying condition causing the cough? Is it just about work, or is this about like a larger feeling of like I'm dissatisfied with so many other things, and then the thing at work is happening? Because it's that snowflake that causes the avalanche. It's not the snowflake, it's all the snow that's built upon the mountain. It's all the things that came before that. And that's kind of what I was saying a moment ago about like the old wounds. If, let's say I hurt my shoulder when I was 15 playing football, and then I'm carrying groceries today. It's not the groceries, it's the old wound that really gets triggered by the things today. And so knowing what our old wounds are and like what does that speak to? Where does that come from? But I think, again, a lot of people just sit with it in their own mind rather than wanting to process it with a therapist, with a friend, with their spouse, with somebody else, because, you can't do your own dentistry, you can't cut your own hair. There's things we can't do ourselves. And we need somebody to help collaborate to really explore what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah. And, that collaboration, um, you know, m- oftentimes maybe men can't express themselves, as I said earlier, with their partner, because it feels like if they express themselves, it's not going to change the situation. You know, as we've seen in the news, people are losing their jobs. Um, the prices of groceries are going up, and, trying to provide, and it's hard and it's tough, and life's pressures get to you. Um, but as you said, we have to express ourselves, but at the same time, men have hard times expressing themselves. So does being too strong actually damage relationships?
Absolutely. I think it builds walls. There's the concept called stonewalling, where you shut down and your partner's coming at you and they're talking and they're critical or they're blaming or they're judgmental, and you shut down and you just swallow it and swallow it and swallow it. And it doesn't feel like, I hear this a lot, the sense of unfairness. I do so much to provide and take care of my family and support them, and I just want to be appreciated. I want to be, comforted. I want to be reassured, not blamed, judged, not piled on. It doesn't feel fair. I feel taken advantage of. I get resentful, being deprived of that acknowledgement or appreciation. And a lot of that is, again, it comes from what we can't control. And we all are stuck in that reality of so little things we control. But the irony is, like, anger is this way to, like, lash out to get control, and we end up acting in a way that's out of control. And so I'm the only thing I really can control. Even my DNA is out of my control. I don't, the lottery of life, I don't control the family I'm born into. I don't control so many things about the world around me, but I get to choose my response. And something I always try to highlight is that I can be, like, loving, kind, caring, and somebody breaks my heart. I can be a careful driver, check my mirrors, put my turn signal on, somebody hits my car. I can be hardworking, punctual, loyal, and I lose my job. You make great efforts and you still get terrible outcomes. But only I can acknowledge those efforts, because everyone's going to, Aaron lost his job, his wife left him, like, he got into a car accident. But I know I made great efforts. And that's where I think is, like, if we don't look at what we are accomplishing, sometimes we just focus on, well, it feels unfair that, like, people are taking advantage of me, or I'm being exploited, or I'm, getting punished, rather than, like, like, I know what I did, I know my efforts. And I think sometimes it is really between me and me to really come to terms with, like, who I who I want to be. Do I want to be somebody who approaches the world with anger, or do I want to be somebody who keeps things in perspective? And I know that's easier said than done, but that's part of the journey here.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great idea of working to tear down those walls that we've built up. I think everybody has been to that point where, whether they're saying, I don't want to burden my spouse, or I don't want, my mom or anyone, friends, to really worry about me. So yeah, I think what you said about not necessarily worried about, keeping control, because there's so many things in life we can't control. It's about how we respond. That's the only thing that we really can control. So.
Because I dealt with this in the past. I graduated from college, and a lot of times new college grads, they can't get a job, and you you're supposed to go to college, get your degree, get a good job, and then there's an anger about that, and the pressure of, oh, you have these accolades or something, or you're supposed to be something, and it's not happening. And how do you think the world of social media, because we can't let the out I always say this quote, you can't let the outside determine what's on the inside, because you're never going to be happy. As you said, life is crazy, it's chaotic, you can't control it. So how does social media play in that? Get their reward from the outside.
Well, I think there's so much comparison that happens with social media, and it's very important. Social media is very curated. It's very, like, filtered. People are only putting out parts of their life, not the whole. And we all have part of our life that's vulnerable or insecure or filled with self-doubt. And just like we have parts of ourselves that are confident and assertive or gregarious and really extroverted. And the parts don't make the whole, right? Like I can have a flat tire doesn't mean I need a new car. It means I work on the part. And so I think a lot of times people get stuck in this kind of all or nothing. It's all good, it's all bad. And they see people on social media like, oh, look how everything is always good for them. Versus like, well, yeah, they're only putting out their good parts, right? Like that most people aren't putting on social media, like, yeah, I got passed over for a promotion and I'm fighting with my partner and I got a flat tire and my kids aren't getting bad grade. Like, it's like, whoa, like I don't know how to handle that. And people just kind of like,
Yeah.
there's no like button. What do you do with that, right? Rather than like, hey, let me show you how great this wonderful trip is. And I like, got a promotion and they hype themselves up because there is a performative aspect to social media. And so I think that's where, there's this unfortunate reality I think we're living through is called loneliness. And we're not really connecting with people. Like social media isn't the whole person, right? There's just these parts. And I think a lot of, men, there's a lot of male loneliness happening. It's hard to build friendships. It's hard to build community. There just isn't time for things. And so I think social media is a way to be like, hey, like I can put out there the good things in my life and people will make me the illusion of feeling connected to maybe somebody you haven't seen in 20, 25 years. But like at the end of the day, you're really feeling alone. Like you really want to have a phone call or a FaceTime or like, God bless you, meet somebody in person. And so I think there's this opportunity to really bring things offline and into reality. The virtual world is not the real world. And I think that's where a lot of people get it's in the work I do with clients, a lot of online activity is just really self-regulation. That like we don't want to think about ourselves. So sometimes people drink or they use pot or they do social media. Like it's a way to kind of turn off my brain. And I think what happens is then it amplifies these feelings of insecurity or feeling deficient, feeling lesser, rather than like, well, I'm equal, regardless of like life treating me well or being hard. I'm still an equal person. And like what I think and feel is equally important. And people care about me. But if I don't let people know what I need, they're going to assume everything's okay. And especially when I create this image on social media, it's like, oh, look how great everything is. And then it's like, wow, I can't believe Aaron's so depressed. He ended up in the hospital. But like sometimes that's where like, people don't want to, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to feel weak rather than like allowing yourself to feel equal.
And I don't know if you have any recommendations for people who, yeah, maybe they are too involved in social media and it has been contributing to maybe a negative impact on their emotional state. So, any words for those people that can help them out?
Well, I guess what I think about is what can we do to make ourselves happy? And it sounds like a simple question, but it's one of the questions I ask a lot of, especially a lot of men. And they're like, I don't know. I know what I can do for my job or my parents or my spouse or my kids, but like, what makes me happy? And so it's like, sometimes it's building a skill, sometimes it's learning something, sometimes it's exploring, it's travel. It, and so, where I guess I'm trying to say is we go from the virtual world back to the real world. And even just like sometimes going for a walk, going to the gym makes me feel happy, makes me feel like I can influence this. I can control how much I'm bench pressing or how fast I'm going on the treadmill. And so there's something empowering in that. You know, just shooting some hoops, even if it's just by yourself, there's something more meditative and grounding in that. And so I think that there's opportunity. I mean, there's lots of app blockers and ways to kind of put limits on social media, but it's like, what is it I'm not trying to disparage technology in general because I think there's value in it, but like, what is it I'm really trying to do with my time? It's something I think worth noting is that, we all get 24 hours. I don't care if you're Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, we all get 24 hours. It's, so 8 hours to work, 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours to live in an ideal world. And even 8 hours of living, I got to commute, I got to groom, I got to eat, I got to spend all the time with my relationships. I don't really have a lot of time for me. And I think a lot of times we're just burning that time on social media rather than being protective. I would just give people my ATM number. So why am I just giving people my time? And more specific, we get 168 hours a week. And so if you think about it, if you're sleeping 50, you're working 40, you get 78 hours to do everything. And that sounds like, well, that's not bad. But really, again, I got to invest in all the relationships, all the house, all the chores, all the demands of life. Where I'm going to your question is, where is there time for me? And again, I have to be on my list of priorities because, the old airplane, if I don't put my air mask on, how do I help those around me? And a lot of people, I think, see that as selfish. What I talk about is self-preservation. I take care of me so I can be a good husband and father and son and brother and employee and all the things. But it all starts with Aaron.
Yeah, and that brings us to the next point, which you kind of talked about, ways of, getting on social media, healthy ways. Um, Research shows that men who learn basic emotional regulation skills like awareness, breathing, reframing can reduce anger intensity by 30 to 50% within weeks. Not because they get softer, but because they get smarter ways to handle stress. Aaron, can we talk about solutions? I know you talked about some about, going to the gym or different things. I know I like to work out. That's my stress reliever. What are
Right.
some healthy ways?
Again, one shoe doesn't fit everyone's foot, so like one strategy isn't going to work for everyone. Some people like to cook, some people like to do meditation, some people like to do some exercise, competitive sports. Some people just playing bar trivia, meeting up with some friends. Other people like to plan a trip, even if they're not going somewhere. I just want to kind of open some tabs and like, okay, if I were to go to, I don't know, California, where would I go? Where would I stay? What would I want to do? They're kind of like allowing them to have a sense of a goal to work towards. For some of my clients, I do some writing. I mean, it sounds kind of again cliche, but it's not like Dear Diary. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just making a list of like, what have I done today? We always have these to-do list conversations, but I try to highlight a done list because the to-do list makes you feel like, oh, there's so much, it's overwhelming, all the things I have to do. Whereas today, I vacuumed, I did laundry, I went to work, I took the kids to childcare, I talked to my parents. Look at what you did today. Like there's a sense of empowerment that comes from what you did rather than what you still have to do. I think there's also ways of just looking at your time. All right, I woke up at like 6. I got the kids ready out the door. I, did some laundry. I got to work. Look at like how am I spending my time? Because where is there time for me? For some people, it's going to be a little bit more there. There's exercise, what's called progressive muscle relaxation, where you're creating tension in your body and you release it. That's a great, you can look at YouTube. There's lots of videos on that where I can choose to let go of that tension how and when I want to. Other times it is just connecting, just socializing, just being with a friend. It doesn't have to be like we're all going to go out and have drinks. It's like, it's again, it sounds kind of like have a game night, but like, if we have the game, if we would say we're watching football, it's like, well, can I put some music on? I don't know what's wrong with the commentary, but like, can I just like have an experience that works for me? Can I just create an atmosphere where I can talk with a friend and it feels like there's a little bit more space to be heard and seen rather than we're at a crowded bar? Because I think maybe the short answer is like, what do I need? And sometimes if I don't know what I need, then I just have to keep exploring.
Man, Aaron, I just want to tell you, I am such a to-do list person, and the point that you made about creating a done list, because I tell you, I have like 5 to 10 to-do lists on my phone, from shopping to-do list, work to-do list, housework to-do list,
Right.
and sometimes it can be really overwhelming. And where it's like, oh man, I thought I did a lot today, but I still have 10 more items on the list. But really reframing it to show like, hey, I actually got this done, this done, this done. I never thought about it like that. So I'm definitely going to take that advice and create myself a done list. But just also I had a question. So in relationships, what's one, going back to the keyword, tool that men can use to communicate their frustrations better without exploding on someone and without shutting down?
Yeah. I think that there's like language is really important. Obviously, like, how we communicate. If people hear anger, anger gets other people to protect themselves. There's always 2 points of anger management. One is managing our anger, but two is how to respond to others' anger. And so, like, if I'm putting out anger, I'm probably going to get people getting anger back to me, or they're going to try to protect themselves. They're going to have their own fight or flight reaction. So, what's behind that anger? Something hurt me. It's causing me pain. Something disappointed me. I expected you to give me a hug, and I walked in and you just ignored me. That frustrates me. And so how do I communicate that? Hey, hon, I'm disappointed. And that's not like, again, Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, kind of just right. And tone matters. And so I think like, yeah, Aaron, that's a great point. Like it shifts how people are going to hear my message based on the tone of my voice. And so there is a little bit of like being able to slow down and talk with a softer voice. It's not distorted. Like I just want to be able to talk to you and have a calmer voice. It's not like a baby voice. It's like just like it's one's a little more deferential. It's one of like I want to show people how I want to be treated is kind of the language. So I'm going to put out there what I want to get back. And so if I want people to show me care, it's like, I'm disappointed. I really wanted to hug when I walked in. It didn't feel like that was a really caring moment. Because I think it's a simple strategy. Those connections where we like, you think about the kids go to school and you're like, hey, have a good day. And then they come home like, hey, how was your day? We need to do that with our partner. Like you come in like, hey, how was your day? Or like you're leaving like, hey, I'm going to go. Those arrivals and departures, those little times are important. Just to kind of those reunions and departures allows us to connect. Because if we break the connection in our relationship, it really starts to ripple out and feeling like I can't rely on you. And it's not trust and infidelity, it's trust and a reliability component. And so I think being able to communicate that concern of like, hey, these are things that disappoint me or make me feel like I'm not connected to you. And it might feel like this is like a tall order, but I think about we do things all the time that are good for our kids, even if like I don't want to do it. Like I know my kids want to go to laser tag. I'm like, I would rather do other things, but all right, I'm gonna do the thing my kid wanted to do because it's good for them, right? I want them to have a good childhood. I do the things for my partner because it's good for us. And I think where I'm trying to speak to is not just about what's good for me. It's not just what's good for you. Somebody needs to think of us. And therein lies, it's good for us to kind of have those moments of connection. It's good for us to be able to like, hey, can we find 20 minutes just to kind of connect? Not like logistics, like, are you going to pick the kids up or get milk? But like, hey, how are we doing? And that 20 minutes is what kind of keeps the engine going because I get it, life's busy. Again, like finding time. But we find 20 minutes for an email. We'd find 20 minutes for a sick relative. How is it we can't find 20 minutes for ourselves? We can't find 20 minutes for our relationship.
Yeah. And for the men who feel guilty about their anger or scared of being emotional, what would you say would help them understand that strength and vulnerability can coexist?
That again, there's different parts of us, right? And we all have parts of us that we all have deficits. Some people are really good at basketball, some people aren't. Some people are really good at chess, some people aren't. It's we all have our deficits. And I'm not saying we're defined by our deficits any more than we're defined by our strengths. And so we get to be all of it, right? Again, there's a lot of miles in the car, but it's still a good car. Like just because we have deficits doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. And so I think where I'm more explicit, like we don't that judgment, like this is bad or this is good or this is right or this is wrong. There's a little bit of like how our brain is hardwired. Our brain is wired to think about things in very binary, good, bad, right, wrong. Relationships, people don't fit into those categories because we're both. There's things about us that could be better. There's things about us that could be worse. And so I think there's a point of like, I can understand there's parts of this that need to be better, and there's parts of this that are actually make me feel really confident. And what do I want to focus on? Because I know when I focus on my deficits, I feel maybe less confident. And I'm not saying arrogance, I'm not perfect, but there's this point of like, I'm still healthy, even if I have a moment where I do unhealthy things. I can separate the act from the actor, the person from the behavior, the sin from the sinner, the individual from the circumstance. So many ways to say it. It doesn't have to be like this is all or nothing. And so I think that this is all my way of saying self compassion. And self compassion might seem a little woo woo, but like there is this point of like, I want to be kind to myself rather than being judgmental because it doesn't motivate me. It's like, I think a lot of us maybe got a message try harder, stupid. And at some point, we stop trying harder, we just feel stupid. And so, like, I need to be kind to myself because I want people to be kind to me.
Yeah. And when you were talking about something you just said just made me think of a question like, you know how the hidden anger builds up, and sometimes that anger the person can start to hate themselves or, dislike features about themselves. Do you see that for the people you work with?
Absolutely. It's we punish ourselves. And that self-hatred is really a way of punishing myself. I'm judging myself so harshly. It comes in this way of punishment. And that's where it is. I'm going to withdraw and shut down, or I drink, or like push people away because I don't feel deserving. And I think there's this, again, there's a judgment over like what I should be versus who I am. And I don't know, again, that's a deeper, like peeling the onion, some more layers, like where the shoulds come from. And again, behind judgment is feeling guilty. And what happens with a lot of people in arguments is we start defending ourselves. Like we start like, because I here talk to these people. I'm a good guy here. I'll show you like, and this is all the good things I've done for our relationship. Like I need to give expert witnesses and give evidence like I'm in a court of law that we all are equally. We all, again, regardless of background, regardless of choices. I mean, I've worked with people who are in prison. I've worked with, people who are making the seven figures and everything in between. And we all struggle. And so, like, I don't celebrate that, but like, there's something universal in that. And rather than saying I shouldn't have struggles, it's like, well, struggles help us grow. Everything that was we do today that's easy at one point was hard. And so hard isn't bad, easy is not good. We actually value a lot of hard things. Career, education, home, marriage, they're hard. And that's what makes them valuable. Gold, diamonds, art, like things that are hard to get have a lot of value. And so when we're feeling that kind of discouragement and anger and punishing ourselves, it's really hard. But I'm like, there's a point to empower yourself because God, look at some of the hard things you deal with every day, bro. And I really like, I'm so impressed with how that you have had to struggle and barely keep your head above water. But yet here you are, one foot in front of the other, Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, life keeps going forward.
This conversation was needed. So many men are carrying silent anger, not because, they're bad men. They're just overwhelmed by life. What we heard today was powerful, and you can still be strong and still be human, and you can lead and still feel. Aaron, before we close, what's one final message you want men to walk away with?
What I think about is that you are not defined by your situation. You're not defined by how other people, you get to define yourself. And I think that's really hard because we might hear these external messages, but I get to define what a good man is. That doesn't come from the world, that's from society, that's from my parents, because not to knock them down, but they have their own struggles. We're all imperfect people. So I get to define what the best version of me is. And it's a constant process. But like, even if I make a mistake, I'm still a lovable person. Even if I struggle, I'm still lovable. Even if I intentionally do something that I regret, I'm more than that moment. And so it's really about how do I want to define myself rather than taking others' opinions of me personally and trying to get them to think differently. Because how I feel about myself is all that matters. That's all I can really control.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, to explore Aaron's work and just check out Instant Anger Management or the Anger Management Workbook for Men and visit carmincounseling.com. Links are in the show notes. And for anyone listening, if you're feeling overwhelmed by stress or carrying anger, then and you don't feel safe, I just want to let you know we've been there, we've done that. Dash Wellness was created by people who have been there and done that. And we're here to help you build the emotional resilience, balance, and healthier patterns for the future. Start your wellness journey today using the link in the description. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.